Continuing with the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. The spinal nerves come off of the spinal cord at regular intervals, usually exiting at each level of the vertebrae that match up with them. And so what's neat about spinal nerves is that they are both sensory and motor at the same time. They have sensory nerve tracts that are actually heading into the spinal cord, and they have motor nerves that come out of the spinal cord. And in general, it's a good idea to remember that sensory comes in the back, motor comes out through the front. So sensory in through the back, motor out through the front. And since this is the dorsal side of the vertebra, then we know that this is the dorsal side or back side of the spinal cord. So these sensory neurons come in through the back. And you'll notice that there's a bulge here. It's called the dorsal root ganglion. And it turns out that with the structure of sensory neurons, they tend to have cell bodies all collected in one spot. Since cell bodies are the thickest part of the neuron, it forms a bulge. And that bulge is the dorsal root ganglion. And then axons will continue here and come up and enter the spinal cord at what's called the dorsal spinal root, which is here. You see those neuron axons coming in to the spinal cord here. This is the dorsal spinal root. And again, these are sensory neurons, so they're bringing in sensory input to the spinal cord. And then if necessary, the spinal cord will do something with those inputs. And oftentimes the inputs are going out through what are called motor neurons at the ventral spinal root, which is this structure here. The ventral spinal root contains the axons of motor neurons. And you can see those axons coming through here and then forming a much thinner part of that, if I can get the pen here, a much thinner part of that spinal nerve here. Not nearly as thick as the dorsal root ganglion region that's sensory. So sensory in through the back with a dorsal root ganglion feeding into a dorsal spinal root, which is here. And then motor out the front, where you have motor axons leaving the spinal cord and going out down that same spinal nerve.